Hey folks, Steve here with another World in Flames video. We're going to be looking to get into the September-October turn, but we need to finish out July and August. Now, I did take care of a few things from the end of the last video here. So I did partisans, and there was no real partisan activity. I did do U.S. entry, and so the United States has instituted the Selective Service Act. So they are able to build ground units in higher quantities now. Not that they necessarily are going to want to or need to, but it is one of the things that when I looked at the list of U.S. entry options to take, there really wasn't a whole lot that we could do with the points that we had. And so I opted to go with Selective Service just to get a prerequisite out of the way. And maybe we can start building a few units here and there just to start getting ready for the U.S. entry into the war sometime in the next year, since we're still in 1840. I did return to base. I did final reorg, so basically the next thing I'm going to do here is get production done. Now, enough has kind of changed on the board with Egypt being taken and Commonwealth convoys being heavily disrupted that, basically we're going to be looking to I'm going to have to just reevaluate everyone's production just because so much has changed. France has lost a lot of stuff. The Commonwealth has lost a lot of access to stuff. There's a huge dead pile of French stuff over there, just in general. That's going to have an element to play with the bonus production. So this production here is actually going to be a little complicated for me. What I'm going to do is take care of all of that off camera. And then when I come back, I'll just kind of show the units that are going to go into the reinforcement as reinforcements for September, October rather, and we'll get them set up. There is going to be one thing just to call out for the peace phase, which comes after production, but it's just that indeed the minor country Egypt will have been conquered over here by the Italians, actually. So they have taken control of the capital. There are still Commonwealth units that are sort of isolated within the Nile River valleys, the Nile River sort of confluence. I forget the tributaries. I forget the words for all that. Bad geography, Steve. But yeah, so that's going to be Italians for the moment, which kind of helps seal off a lot of the Eastern Med now for the Allies, which really begins to make this game more of a Western map game until the Soviets can get more heavily involved. And I think at this point, just kind of looking at the lay of the land, I mean, it's probably still not clear to the Allies if the Axis would be doing a sea lion. I mean, it's certainly possible. The focus is still on France, and all Germany is doing in the east is sort of garrisoning. So I don't think they've tipped their hand, but there's obviously some indicators. And either way, the UK kind of has no choice but to build units in the UK as much as possible, because now, having lost the Mediterranean route, so to speak, through Egypt, through the Suez Canal, everything they do from now on is going to be trying to project power through Gibraltar to Malta and around. They could potentially try to reestablish supply lines to these isolated units, but I don't think they're going to conquer Egypt by themselves at this point. They're really up against the wall a little bit. So the decision point for the UK is really, or for the Commonwealth, do we throw money after bad and try to reestablish ourselves in the Med, or do we look for alternatives and kind of figure out what else can be done in the interim, which might mean just hardening the UK and prepping the UK for the long war, which may really mean just lots of aircraft building and reestablishing of the Navy, which are things that they would probably want to do anyway. Key difference being, if they knew Sea Lion was coming, they would concentrate a little bit more on ground forces to sort of garrison the home island. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from there. The Italians, even with the gains they've made here, don't have a lot of force to throw around, so for them, it's like, okay, we're going to clear Egypt, and then what, right? Do we send these forces west? Do we try to send a couple of units to take control of Syria. That might be worth it just to take Syria and sort of close off another area. Aligning Iraq doesn't do a whole lot for us. It might be worth it, but we also still have Malta to deal with, and it's going to be a tough nut to crack if we were going to try to take it. Gibraltar's still kind of far away right now, so it's kind of hard to know exactly what to do here. We ended up focused on Egypt so much that it's kind of where's the pivot point? Where do we go? We could be going into Greece. We could be going into Algeria and Tunisia to try to take some of those areas. We might not be able to do it fast enough for it to really matter for the long game. So yeah, it's just kind of odd. Was hoping to have had France knocked out by now, but it's still being around. We've got to decide how we want to proceed. What do we want to deal with over here in North Africa when it comes to Vichy, which we haven't really addressed on camera yet, but we're going to be heading that way soon. And our long-term plans as the axis to collapse Vichy, take Spain, take Gibraltar, get the Italian fleet out with the Germans, and go for Sea Lion. And I'd say right now we're probably behind schedule as the Axis, just because, again, France has been able to hold on just enough that we haven't closed it off yet, and we're about to hit the fall season, which is going to make everything even more difficult. So we'll see what happens. We're going to take care of production, and we'll be back. Okay, so we're going to take a look here at the stuff that I built this turn. So for the Commonwealth, I have gotten them. The problem with the Commonwealth right now is they are dealing with some reduced production because I didn't get some of their resources around Africa. Now they're still getting quite a bit from the Americas, basically, but they're missing out on some stuff. Oops, I'm dropping some things. So we have a bomber that is going to go, and it's sort of a multi-use bomber here, both strategic and tactical. It's kind of hard to see. There we go. And that's going to be in 3 turns, so 1, 2, 3. And then we are repairing some units that were damaged in the repair pool, being the Revenge, which is a pretty good battleship or cruiser, and actually that is a battleship. Dirt. And then you guys can't see it, the Glorious aircraft carrier. There we go, the Glorious. There we go. So just getting some more air power into the seas. We want to get that back and going. And so that's going to be done 2 turns to repair. So 1, 2. Puts us in the November, December turn for those guys. So that's it for the Commonwealth. For the French, this is actually kind of an interesting thing. The French had lost so many units that even though they were only able to get 4 production points, period, out of their territories, they basically lost out on their overseas possessions, except for the Algerian resource, which they can rail through Spain. And the fact that they've lost a number of factories, they still have enough factories that they could get 4 production points. But the vast majority of their production actually came from bonus build points of destroyed units. So we had 10 extra build points from destroyed units because the French had lost 10 units over the last turn, all of that being recouped into some build points. So what we ended up building here is, and I'm not even sure any of these guys are going to actually make it onto the board. If we're lucky and the French can hold on, then they will get some of this stuff. I couldn't figure out some way to make those build points more valuable because I couldn't give them away. But we're going to try building another bomber in 3 turns. 1, 2, 3. We've got a couple of garrison units, which only take 2 turns to build. So 1, 2. They ended up being okay strength of 4, and another 4 in 2 turns. So they'll come in November, December if we make it, and then another fighter to replace some destroyed fighters. It's actually pretty good with a 5 rating. That's also going to be 2 turns from now. France may not be around at that point, but certainly worth a try. The Americans, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with them, so what I ended up doing with their 5 build points was starting to build an air transport, because at some point we are going to want to use paratroopers in the European theater, so might as well build some now. The naval stuff, we're not, there's still some naval stuff we could build, but it's not as important. We got a lot of that stuff started, so I could afford to build something else this turn. So that's 3, 1, 2, 3. We get that going. Then finally for the Allies, for the Russians, they've gotten some of their resources back from trade with Germany. Basically, they're going to be building 2 motorized infantry and 2 regular infantry. So just building out the Red Army. These units are all basically 3 to 5 combat factors, so not super powerful, but it's strength in numbers, obviously. And the motorized are going to be 3 turns, and then the normal infantry in 2 turns. That leaves the Axis then, and the Italians are feeling pretty good. They actually got a number of resources from Germany that were provided, allowing them to have nearly full production, even if they had gotten an extra resource to fulfill their last factory. You guys aren't seeing the math, I guess it doesn't really matter, but the rounding still makes it so they basically are getting as much production as they can get. And I used all of their production, at least right now, focused on getting guys out of the repair pool. So all the fighting and the med, the units that we were able to keep, basically we have the Guasano, if that's how that's pronounced, the Montecicoli, and the I'm not even going to try. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know how to speak Italian or pronounce things correctly. But basically, it's some of the cruisers that we lost, and some of the, I guess that might be a battleship. Some of our beat-up units, basically, I want to get them back on the board. So they'll be back in 2 turns as well in November, December. So all that fighting, all that action there with the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is doing the same thing. They're trying to repair what they can. The Italians, it's even more important that they get what they've lost back into the seas. Just to retain the size of the Italian Navy, we'll also probably look at finishing the construction of a battleship that is in the construction pool for the Italians at some point. But it's going to be a while before we see all of that fully play out. Finally, for the Germans, I was a little cautious with this build, but basically went for another fighter, bomber, and some militia, because we're going to use these militia to help be garrisons in our conquered territory in France and Northern Europe. I might move some of these guys around. This guy's actually a pretty strong unit. I might use him elsewhere. But yeah, air power to replace losses and to expand our air capability, and then some more infantry for garrison. That's kind of the best thing that I could really manage to build right now on the board, for what's available. So all these guys will go on. Militia coming up next turn. Everything else, all the planes, the fighters coming in 2 turns, the bombers in 3. And that's it for production. So we're going to go into that conquer step. Egypt is conquered. Nothing really happens out of that. And we're going to go right into September, October 1940. Okay, so doing the reinforcements for September, October. Right away, we're going to deal with some of the more interesting Commonwealth results. So we get some convoys, which we will put into Belfast. That's going to help get our convoys set up for American trade, and our 2 aircraft carriers. I need to think about what I want to do here. We already have 1, 2 in the North Sea Fleet. I'm probably going to put these 2 in Plymouth, so that we can project air power into the Med and try to contest the Mediterranean. Then for some other units, kind of interesting. So these are non-British units, right? They're still Commonwealth units, but they're not British units. So there's an Indian unit. Now, because we've taken Port Said in Egypt, this unit cannot reinforce there. It will be reinforced, or it will be placed in South Africa. So we'll have to put it in South Africa. We'll figure out what we want to do from there. But then this motorized Canadian unit will go into Canada, and basically there's a transport waiting for it in Halifax. So that will look to transport it out. Again, the Indian unit going into South Africa. We'll put it in Cape Town, so at least it's at the coast to come off. Looks like we have a aircraft carrier, the Hornet, that will go in a construction pool for the U.S. We also have 2 amphibious transports that will go into the construction pool. Looks like a transport that will go into the Americas. And then we get a whole slew of Russian infantry, or Soviet infantry rather, that will go, believe it or not, in the Soviet Union. So we'll put some of these guys out that way. And then for the French, they do get a garrison and a fighter. So garrison, not a lot of good places to put the garrison. We could put it in Vichy and then try to move it up. That's going to be a challenge. We just don't have any good places to put it, unfortunately. But the fighter we can put in Paris. So there we go. Yeah, it's really hard to reinforce the French lines because, just so you guys can see, I mean the nearest city is either, well, I guess it might be better to put it in Vichy. It's just really tough. The cities are overstacked already, and you got to put them in an open city if you can. So I can't just put them in the line up here. They have to go further back, which might make them useless. Okay, and then for the Italians, we have our paratroopers and a nav bomber, a pretty strong one at that. So that's going to be a pretty powerful improvement for the Italians. So the naval bomber will go into Naples. The paratrooper will go into Milan, where we have an air transport for it. I'm not sure when we're going to use it exactly, but it will help us. Maybe we could entertain going after Malta or something. And then the Germans have a whole boatload of stuff. The militia that we just built, the motorized infantry, another garrison, which has turned out to be the Polizei SS unit garrison. Very strong infantry, another garrison, and a rebuilt sub as it happens. So the sub will go into Kiel with our other subs. So now we've got a nice little sub pack we could send out. And then these infantry units we'll just put in Germany at various places where they will be useful. Okay, so in terms of the lending stage, we're going to have the Americans lend resources to lend 5 resources to the British. The Germans are going to lend 5 resources to Italy, same as before. And we'll go ahead into the initiative stage. I should also point out, I didn't mention it in previous videos, but we did have a case where with the whole Bessarabia thing that we did, I should have done it on camera, I should have explained it. There's a whole thing where Hungary then demands Transylvania from Romania, and Bulgaria wants southern Dobruja from Romania. And basically it just works out. I mean, it's really kind of complicated stuff to look at in the rulebook about, like, do you let it happen or whatever. It is better just to go ahead and let Hungary get Transylvania and for Bulgaria to get South Dobruja, because that will allow us to align them. Then we can also align Romania proper after we've taken Paris and knocked out France. So we're sort of waiting to do that because we want all of the U.S. entry to happen all at once rather than to space it out. and so I'm waiting until France is taken out before we get some of the Balkan countries into alignment with the Axis. Okay, so we're going to do initiative stage right now. It's no die roll bonus to anyone, except the Axis wins ties, and we'll see what happens here. Axis wins 6-3, so the Axis will get to go first, and we can just get right into things there. Now we will need a roll for weather, and let's see what we get. So it is September, October. It's got a chance to be bad. We get a 4, so it is actually fine everywhere for now. So possibly some of the last impulses where we will still have nice weather. The Axis is going to have to do their very level best to get into Paris at this point. They've got 3 hexes on Paris, so it may be as simple as one powerful attack here in early September. We take Paris, we get everything in alignment, and then we just get our way into Vichy, basically, as best as we can. Anyway, that's probably what we'll aim to do. What the Italians are going to do might need some more difficult determination, because there's we just have there's options here, and it's a tough call to determine how we want to proceed. With the Italians, we've taken Egypt. We need to clean out the rest of the Commonwealth units in Egypt itself. But then it's a question: do we try to rush units over to the west and try to take out Tunisia? That might be valuable. Do we try to take Algeria? That might be valuable. We'll have to look at that. The time is kind of ticking. This might be the last real turn that we get to be hostile with the French, at least before Vichy and then collapsing Vichy. So the more we take now, the easier it may be later. And I like the idea of taking ports from the French where they won't be able to really project much power into the Med if we can take enough of their ports out of the way. So I don't know. We'll have to see that. The Axis gets to go. I'll make the impulse selection, and then I'll take action. I will probably show attacks on Paris and in France in general on camera. Otherwise, I'll probably move very quickly so that you guys aren't watching every little thing that I do. But if it's significant, I'll try to record it. If it's a big deal, we'll talk about it. Okay, I went as Italy, and I sort of corrected something from before. So I had the paratroopers show up in Rome itself, and I just did all the Italy stuff because it wasn't really going to affect anything with Germany. I had Italy do a combined, and basically I put some of our air units, our naval air, out to the Western Med and the Italian coast to protect one, our convoys, and two, to project some of our power westward, just to kind of fend off the Allies a little bit. Having air there will mean that they'll have a harder time bringing us to a real fight, because we'll be able to use air combat. Naval air supremacy is important here. And then in the east, I just sort of moved around the isolated units a little bit more. They are basically, I guess the thing I could have done, if I look at, yeah, I didn't want to do that. So, yeah, so they're kind of hanging out there, surrounding the UK units there. They still have the potential to move into Damietta and take the port, but if they move, it's going to put them out of supply. So they'd have to get their naval units over here and not be intercepted and not be caught in combat and all that good stuff. So it'll be a tough call to see if anything can be done about that. So we want to hit them, but we're going to wait yet. I needed to get my air units out. And what I did do is do an air rebase of the air transport down to Rome so that our paratroopers have an air transport. They can be used for a paradrop. Now, what are we going to do with that paradrop? Well, we'll see on the next Axis Impulse. But I've got something a little sporty planned, and we'll see how well it works out. Over here, we did have the unit that was in Port Said, which we can leave empty now because there's really not a good way for the Allies to take back the port right now. They can't do any naval invasions way down there. And so he started moving up and has moved through Tel Aviv and will basically be ensuring that he's capturing all of the capitals of like Palestine. I'm going to have to go look up if Palestine's capital is Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. I'm not 100% sure which it is in this scenario. But we'll capture the cities no matter what, and with the goal to send this unit up into Syria to capture Syria. Now, we could send other forces up here to get Iraq into alignment. I'm not sure I'm going to do that. I may need those units moving elsewhere, but once we clear these guys down here, that'll determine what we do. The one aspect of the Italian fleet is kind of waiting in the wings here. I'm not ready to move them yet. That's going to need to wait just yet. But I've got a plan basically in place. As it is right now, Malta is out of supply at the moment. There is a transport there. They could try some goofiness to try to save these units over in Egypt, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to do that with that transport. It's probably going to get ripped up. But we could think about trying to take Malta at some point. I have other priorities with the Italians right now. So Italians did a combined. Combined's not always very efficient, but in this case, there's a couple of different things I wanted to get going right off the bat, just so that we had better capability to take some actions here. So we did that, and now I'll take a look at the Germans. Okay, so with the Germans, they did a land action, and I did a ground strike on Paris, which caused a pretty big air battle to occur. So you see a lot of French and German flipped units. That's from the recent battle. The French could only throw so much. They wanted to keep some stuff behind to do ground support later. And so, the Germans kind of threw a lot into the ground strikes, and across, it was a good thing they did, because across multiple ground striking bombers, they were able to flip both units in Paris itself. So, Paris has been softened up a little bit. We're also starting to, you can see, ooze down south a little bit, and we're going to be potentially looking at some attacks both here and on Paris. We might even attack over here. I'll have to look at the odds very quickly. So just a heads up, I didn't do that on camera, but just trying to keep things moving. I had also moved some different units around over here. Did some minor rail movement, and just basically working it so that we're making our way over what could be the last couple of impulses with good weather, but if we can take Paris, then it really won't matter too much as to what will be left at that point. So looking good there. I'm going to do some analysis of our combat tables, and then we'll see about the big important roles for Paris. Okay, just want to show leading up to the big show. We had a 3-to-1 odds combat over here. I rolled an 8, so remove the French unit. A lot of these guys flipped. Basically, the whole eastern section of France up there, northeastern, is clear. Then we had an attack here, which was 3-to-1 odds. I rolled a flat 10 and totally cleared the hex, and half the units didn't have to flip. So we were advancing there. So far, so good. I mean, the whole situation's untenable. We're kind of reaching case red at this point, or, fall rot, to be, where, beyond the capture of Paris, but the extension of the Axis forces into the rest of France, penetrating into France and taking hold of the countryside. So we're kind of, maybe I'll call this video case red. We'll see where we get. But now we're going to have the big battle for France. And so I just want to give that little update beforehand. I mean, this is really where we're going to see the rest of the action. So just to walk through what we've got, we have a 7 and a 6. So we have 13 factors there by itself. We could see up to 5 more combat factors added. But what we're probably going to see happen is, just from the get-go, we have 16 here. We've got another 15 there, so 31 plus 6 37, so 45 combat factors. 45 to 13. I mean, that's still not great. That's 3-to-1 odds. That could be better. But what's going to happen is the French are going to try to throw in as much as they can here, and it's really going to depend on what the Germans try to do on their own. So if they throw everything they have into this, the Germans could see. Let's see. Yeah, I mean the Germans could see 49 combat factors. They got all their ground support in. They could put some decent fighters into the air. It could be this could be a big deal. So, I mean, let's just have it out, right? And let's just have it out and see what happens. So what the Germans would do is they would send in these guys as ground support. And I guess what I'll do, I can make it over here so everything's on camera. So you've got bombers there that they would want to send in. Fighters escorting would be some of these nearby fighters. The French would be sending in their own bombers. And then the real question is, do they send in this fighter as a fighter bomber and get 3 more in? It's a tough call. What would make a difference here, right? I mean, in terms of range, they can all throw themselves in there. It's not really a big deal. So I'm not worried about like Axis goes and then French goes, whatever. They can get all this stuff in here. It's just a matter of how does the French want to do this. So if they have 2 factors, it would make it be 15. 45 to 15 is still 3-to-1 odds. If we added another 3 in there, it would be 18. So I think what we want to do is, I don't know, that German fighter is really good, but we'll see. Let's because if we can knock it down to 2-to-1 odds, then that might be the difference for the French to win this. So they're going to go just straight up as bombers both, and we'll see what happens. So this is a tremendous disadvantage for the French at first blush, but we'll see what we get. So we'll see what we get. So rolling for the French. We rolled good, but we're on the -4. Or I'm sorry, that's who would be rolling right now? I should look that up because it's going to be important. Shoot. Air combat. The inactive side rolls 2 dice and adds them together. Okay, so so the French did do good, but they're on the -4. So as a DX, defender destroys own front fighter or bomber. I think they'll destroy their front bomber and just let that bomber be destroyed. So now the Germans will roll. And they rolled okay. They got a 14 on the +4 AA. Attacker aborts defender's front fighter or bomber. Well, that means this guy's aborted. And then the French, if they can get this bomber through, I mean, that's the clear thing. So still operating at a -3. They rolled well again. 4 on the -3 is a DX. Defender destroys own front fighter bomber. Oh, man. I guess they're going to go for the bomber because they really need to shoot down the French. Man, this is rough for the Germans. All right, Germans are going. they actually rolled fantastic. So they rolled a 19. That's on the +3 table. Is attacker destroys. Okay, so then the French lose this fighter. Okay, so for the cost of both of their bombers for ground support, they did manage to destroy. They did manage to destroy the Allied ground support, which is really, destroyed or aborted them, I guess. So these guys are going to RTB. Nobody gets additional ground support, and so what that just leaves it to is a 45 to 13, which is 3-1 odds, and I think that's really all we got. I mean, that's as good as it gets at this point. It's going to be on the assault table. 3-1 odds, man, and we need to roll well. We need to roll very well. If we can, man, we can't retreat them out. This actually isn't going as well as I thought or was hoping it would go. Dang, 3-1 odds. I think we've got, let's see, +2 for the flipped units. Yeah, it's plus the armor doesn't matter here at all. Even the defending armor doesn't really matter here. The armor's in there because of its defensive factors. There is a -1 because of the printed factory hex. Just a +1. Yeah, I think we've just got a +1. So 3-1 odds +1. So we got a 7, which is a 1-2. Okay, so 2 hexes, or 2 units lost for the French, 1 unit lost for the Germans. And I think what we'll do, let's see what's going to be the best thing to lose here. We can lose this Berlin militia, I guess. And then, let's see what happened to that unit I just moved. Okay, so this is the aftermath. I had to move some stacks around. I might have accidentally moved aircraft too much, but just within these hexes, shuffling units around. We took it. So we lost 1 unit. I'm losing the Berlin militia, which we can get back relatively easily, I'm hoping. It was a good, strong unit, but I'd rather lose other units and ensure that our line is well established here. So yeah, we took Paris. So basically, if we reach the end of the turn, we'll declare Vichy at that point. So right now, basically, I'll have to look if there's any value in even fighting off these other French units. But, basically, we're going to have some free reign here to, smash our way through. We could declare Vichy at the end of the turn no matter what happens from here. I'm not sure how much value there is in just continuing to shatter the French forces, but they don't have much left, right? I mean, they're basically on their last legs. They've got a couple units left on the board. We're going to continue to smash our way through here, and there's really not much even the British can do to stop it from happening. So if we get to the air rebase phase, I think I had like 1 more air mission left, and just rebase 1 unit up. I'm going to flip this guy so we can flip these guys. 1, 2. Three. And 4. Wow. And 4. I guess I could flip another HQ and try to flip a couple more units. But I'm not sure that yeah, I don't know if that's really needed. Um, there is the river line here that will be tough to deal with, potentially. Yeah, I mean, we can flip him and ensure that this guy comes up. Sorry. This guy's flipped up. And then, let's see. This guy's flipped up. Okay. So a little reorg, kind of expensive, but again, we're just ensuring that our surge forward is uninterrupted. And that is it for, I guess I gotta put this guy back. Boink. Okay, that's it for the Axis. The Italians are positioning. The Germans, in what could be the last good weather of the turn, have taken Paris. So Paris has been taken. And we're getting closer and closer to the end of the whole Case Yellow business here. I mean, Case Yellow is functionally complete. We are now looking at Case Red, basically. We can call it Case Red from here on out. Okay, switching over to the Allies. They've got some tough stuff to figure out on what they want to do. The French have lost a lot of stuff. The Germans did just lose some bombers, so that's kind of nice. That's going to take some time to replenish. The Commonwealth is going to have some tough decisions to make here. They've got to figure out what they want to do navally, and really so does the French. I mean, what else can the French do at this point other than... I mean, the rest of their units are lambs to the slaughter, so do the French just take naval actions and try to knock some Italians around while they still can? I don't know. I'll have to think on it. Okay, with the Allied impulse, there's some considerations to make here, and I want to take some time to explain them, though it may take the rest of this video. I will say that the segments of the video you're watching now were recorded many weeks before I'm recording this part again. One of those situations of life and work being far too busy and incapable of playing a game, which is a bummer. So what's the situation? Well, for as good as the Italians have done in the Mediterranean, they're still pretty fragile, all things considered. We've certainly hurt the Commonwealth, but the overall Commonwealth fleet is still very powerful, and they still control access to the Western Mediterranean. Now, the Eastern Mediterranean is shut down, and the Italians have the opportunity to do what they like, but we still have Malta to worry about. That's still there. Gibraltar's still a concern. We might be knocking Malta out of supply at the moment, but we can't just easily get in there just yet, anyway, not without some concerted effort to bomb, ground strike, the units there, and then try to do a naval invasion. We have other things in mind that the Italians would like to do, just to kind of help beat up on France. And so with the Allied movement, we kind of have to decide what do we want to do. Now, the Commonwealth is probably going to do some combination of naval activities. They need to get some coverage out there. They need to start getting some convoys set up and protection for them. And they have to decide, is the Commonwealth going to try to come down into the Med to contest the Italians? And if they do that, they need to come in with enough force for it to be valuable. Now, the Italians still have a little bit of naval power in reserve that they can send out, but at least at the moment, the Commonwealth still has to worry a little bit about German subs, so they can't just leave guys unattended wherever they send convoys. So, what the Commonwealth does may depend on what the French decide to do. Now, the French, at this point, are kind of done, right? We know that the Germans have Paris. They can declare Vichy at the end of the turn, but that still has to wait until the end of the turn. So there's still some time for for the French to do something. Now, here's where sort of the, like, what could the Axis do kind of impacts what the Allies would want to do. So here's the thing. If we look at France in particular, there we go. The idea here is that now that we've taken Paris as the Axis, we can declare Vichy. That's going to sort of reset the board a little bit. All the French units, or the majority of the French units, will be neutral. That will open up the free hand of the Italians to do some shenanigans if they really wanted to. But ultimately, because we're going into Spain, what we're going to end up doing is collapsing Vichy not long after that. So we would see basically opting to, create Vichy, maybe even next turn collapsing Vichy immediately, so that we can seize the rest of southern France and then be operating down here. With the winter kind of forthcoming, it kind of makes it hard to justify that. But we would also be looking at the potential to do some landings in the UK, potentially. But the timing of all of that, there's just so much in flux. Now, once we do that, once we collapse Vichy, whatever is left of the French fleet will very likely be able to be sent out as free French units. So the French fleet will still be a factor. If we create Vichy and we collapse it, we might be able to clear off a few units due to overrunning or something like that. But we really don't have much in the way of an option there. Basically, we're sort of stuck needing to pick something. Now, as the French, then what do we do, right? With this could be the last couple of impulses the French even have. If we decided to do a naval move, we could take the French fleet and head into the waters around Italy and the Italian coast and try to disrupt the Italian supply situation over here and just be a nuisance. And that will help keep the Italians from having a free hand in the Mediterranean. That's kind of valuable in and of itself. And there's enough force within the French fleet, if it sticks together in one doom stack, to be quite potent, actually. And we would be hoping to get a good search roll, basically. But by doing that, we sort of give up the potential to do other things. With the activity limits, we could get a naval move, but if we did a naval move, we would have multiple, or a naval action, I should say. We could move units all throughout the Mediterranean to be a nuisance. If we move them all in one naval move, we would then maybe have a combined action and still be able to move some land units over here and try to do something against the Germans, so there's really not much that can be done. There's not a huge cost to it. If we take the French carrier and battleships at a port, that will affect the Vichy die rolls that govern who controls the countries out in the Vichy territories, with it being more likely for territories to go Vichy rather than stay Free France. And technically the French player doesn't know that the Axis are going to immediately collapse Vichy. So it's sort of like, if I'm going to make the decision to take the carrier and the battleships out of the French port, it's because I don't care what goes Vichy at this point. And that's sort of like the gameplay decision I have to make. The other thing I have to keep in mind is, if I make it too easy up here, the Axis could actually decide to keep driving through the country and not declare Vichy. And depending on what the weather looks like, the Germans might be incentivized to try to do the very best that they can to be in a position where they can conquer France outright. Now, why would they do that? Well, there's a couple of different things to look at with trying to do that. If the Axis managed to take the time to do it that way, they would incompletely conquer France rather than causing Vichy. So there would be no Vichy at all, and basically France would become incompletely conquered. It would make its new home country whatever is left. Now, as the Axis, ideally they'd like to have conquered Algeria and Tunisia, maybe even threatening Morocco. And so if the French then had to pick Morocco as their new home country, there's only so many other home countries they could pick, most of them in inconvenient locations on the map board. When they're as just plain France incompletely conquered, and again that means there's no Free France, there's no Vichy France, there's just incompletely conquered France, they still would not be able to cooperate with the British, which means that the French fleets could not base in British ports, at least not without an HQ. They would have really limited range if we could deprive them of enough ports. So even if the French fleet was around, they basically wouldn't have a lot of options in terms of basing capability. And, again, it would just be, we wouldn't have to be dealing with the weirdness that is the Vichy rules as the Axis. We would be pushing basically through North Africa, again, headed towards Gibraltar, heading through France, taking everything the hard way and then going through Spain that way. And it just changes where we have convenience, right? If we Vichy things, then we get a breather and we kind of get rid of all these units by default. But it'll create free France, and that will enable the French fleet, once we collapse Vichy, to cooperate with the British, basically, and have an easier time basing itself in different places. So I'm really not sure what's the best move for the Axis, right? They're just going to do what they can, and if it looks like it's going to be easier to just completely conquer France than worry about, declaring Vichy, then they might just do that. But we're playing the Allies right now in this impulse, this 8-minute explanation of figuring out, well, what are the Allies going to do? Well, the trick here is deciding where do we want to put our naval units. And if we look at the activity charts, so if France does a combined, we get one naval move, which means we're going to pick one place to go as the French fleet, all together, one big move. They're going to go to the same sea box. They're not going to go to separate ones. And they're going to try to do something. But if they go all together, they're probably going to end up in a much smaller sea zone, and they might have to try to get past these units as well. Or they could just come out here in general and maybe have a better sea zone, but it's just the one naval move. The benefits would be that we get a few land moves and even a land attack. Probably most of those land moves are going to be trying to figure something out over here to save the situation or make it more difficult for the Germans. So I could see a case where, we would rather do a naval. That way we can get to more places with more units and cause more havoc. Or we just do a combine and we get the fleet out. I don't see a reason to do just a land, because at this point, like if the French took a land, they did a bunch of a bunch of land moves trying to make something work. It really wouldn't matter. The Germans can just sit back and declare Vichy anyway. So I think it definitely puts the pressure on France to do a combined here or do a naval. Other World War II games probably have some kind of special rules where the French have to try to take back Paris, but that would be a fool's game here right now to try that anyway. It'd be like a play dumb rule. We have an opportunity to do something here. The fleet maybe doesn't know that the fleet doesn't know that Paris has been taken, so they're going out to fight the good fight in the Med. We could try to make something happen. I think that's our best option. I think that's doable and is maybe our best option. So I'll think about it a little bit more, but when we come back, I'll have taken these actions and we'll see what happens with them.